Welcome to Learn as You Grow, the podcast where we grow every day in every way, sharing gardening tips, ideas, and inspiration to help you cultivate your best garden and self. I am Shawnee from the YouTube channel Shawnee Grows. Let's talk about the many reasons to have companion plants in the garden. They have many, many reasons. They help with nitrogen. They break up compacted soils or heavy clay. There's living mulches. Companion plants can have a purpose for support and structure. We can create barriers like hedgerows. There's different reasons to promote air circulation when you're planting in layers and having the diversity and keeping the soil covered is all the reason to feed that soil food web, having more roots in the ground. Roots send messages to the organisms, giving the plant what it needs, having that healthy immune system. Trapping our pests, pushing away our pests. There's so many reasons. Having pet predators coming in, attracting them, and attracting pollinators. So, back it up. Let's talk about helps nitrogen. Planting peas with lettuce. Planting bush green beans with potatoes. Plant your fava beans with sweet corn. Cowpeas with peppers. Those first crops I listed are all nitrogen fixers. The peas, the green beans, the fava beans, the cowpeas. Those are examples of a companion plant. To break up compacted heavy soil, add your daikon radish and turnips. They chisel for you with their deep taproots. Grow a living mulch to keep the soil covered, living pathways, living borders around the edge, your crimson clover, red clover, white clover, oats, rye, yellow mustard. Let's talk about some examples of support, structure, and trellises. So you would start your sunflowers and let them grow for a couple weeks, and then you can plant mini pumpkins around that sunflower, and it will grow, the vine will grow up the sunflower stalk. And now that's a natural trellis. More examples of that. Amaranth and chayote, quinoa and bitter melon, sunchokes and cucamelons, Mexican sunflower with Malabar spinach, Kiss Me Over the Garden Gate with gherkin cucumbers. Now what I've done is sunflowers, a mammoth variety, so thick stalk, tall, with a pickling cucumber, sorghum and asparagus beans, okra with currant tomatoes. Currant tomatoes are like a little tiny cherry tomato. There's a couple different varieties. I can't think of the names right now, but it was in the book Planting Partners, Plant Partners. I think there's a link in the description below. Let's talk about barriers and hedgerows. So this is a specific amount of feet distance, wide and long at the edge, either of the garden or the property somewhere. Examples of things that go in a barrier or hedgerow is dogwood, hollies, beautyberries, elderberries, blueberries, coneflowers, sumac, sunflowers, witch hazel, which I need to figure out if that can grow here in Minnesota in zone 5A, because that sounds cool, and yarrow. They have a purpose. Trapping. Trapping can be interplanting directly near the crop that you want to eat, or planting the trap crop several feet away from the plant you want to eat. When I say trapping, we're trapping pests, bugs that want to eat the food we want to eat. So for example, we want to trap flea beetles from eating the tomatoes. Let's plant radish nearby. We can combine buckwheat, millet, sorghum, and sunflowers as an edge around the garden where you might see stink bugs. Like as a gardener, we wear many hats, right? We have to be scientists. We have to understand the whole life cycle of a seed, and we need to be able to identify insects. Any leaf-footed bug also applies to that stink bug hedgerow that we spoke about. Planting collards several feet away from cabbages so that caterpillar moth goes to the collards and you can handle them there, capture and destroy, before they take out your cabbage crop. Planting cowpeas several feet away from tomatoes to trap the green stink bug. You plant the cowpeas, the trap crop, weeks before you put the tomatoes in. The bugs seek out that trap crop, which is cowpeas in this example, capture and destroy, and then you get your harvest of the tomatoes. Here's a popular example, planting blue Hubbard squash to trap the squash bugs and that squash vine borer. You plant the blue Hubbard squash several feet away from wherever you want to put the main squash patch, 3 to 4 weeks ahead of time. Now, if your grow zone doesn't have enough time for this, it's a little bit more tricky. But that's where you're going to look every day and look for those bugs, the squash bug and the squash vine borer, trap and capture and destroy on the blue Hubbard squash. It's like your sacrifice. So you can have a successful harvest for your main summer squash, winter squash, pumpkins, melons, cucumbers. Plant mustard greens to trap harlequin bugs. Plant a row several weeks prior, several feet away from the outer edge. There's also pushing away pests. So you're confusing them essentially because you're planting something that's stinky and they're not able to find the thing that they want to eat. So an example of that is planting an allium, which is your onions, scallions, and garlic near peppers to confuse the aphids. So this is interplanting. This is where you plant things close together. We just talked about planting several feet away for trapping. Now we're pushing away with interplanting. Another example that I use personally is nasturtiums, which is a flower, with squash, pumpkins, zucchini, melons, cucumbers to confuse the squash bugs. So you can use both systems. You could plant your trap crop and do an interplanting at the same time for natural pest control. And we need to bring predators in. So we're going to get into that as well. Continuing on with pushing away pests, plant green onions with Chinese cabbages to confuse those flea beetles. Plant basil with tomatoes to confuse thrips. Plant calendula with collards for aphids. Your sage, dill, chamomile, hyssop with cabbages, broccoli, kale to repel those cabbage moths, those little green worm caterpillars that chew on everything. Predators. We need them. Our hunters, the beneficial insects that eat these pests. The pests always come first, but if we provide food, the pest, and a habitat for the predator, they will help us. Plant sweet alyssum, zinnias, sunflowers, asters, yarrow, dill, cilantro, fennel, angelica, golden alexandria to bring in ladybugs, lacewings, spiders, soldier beetles, scyphid flies, pirate bugs, damsel bugs, to then eat aphids. See the theme here? Plant this to bring in this predator to eat this pest. Okay, let's give another example. Plant dill, cilantro, caraway, anise, fennel, sage, marjoram, oregano, lemon balm, rosemary, and thyme to bring in the parasitic wasp, one of my favorite predators. Parasitic wasps eat the caterpillars like the hornworms, the fruit worms. They eat moth caterpillars. Let's keep going. Crimson clover brings in minute pirate bugs to eat thrips. Now, again, wearing many hats as a gardener, understanding the bugs is so important. What is a predator? What is a pest? Learn your identification in whatever way. Whatever way you learn. Is it watching a video? Is it getting a book? Is it using an app? Use the tools we have. Now let's talk about something called a beetle bunk. It's a perennial permanent mound located in the property near the garden. There's different examples of what kind of plants would go in a beetle bunk in my companion planting live stream over at Shawnee Grows on YouTube. But essentially it's either 3 to 4 mounds or a whole strip of specific grasses and perennials that you would cut down once a year, whatever the trimming is for that, where the ground beetles can live. So we're attracting ground beetles in a beetle bunk so they can eat slugs, snails, caterpillars, and larvae. There's also something called a robber fly that eats the cabbage worm. Now, I don't think I've seen a robber fly. That's one that I have to look up because I do get a lot of cabbage worms. Now, pollinators, I think we're all familiar with. We need to support the native bees as well as the honeybees. The honeybees have been in the news lately. Our butterflies as well. So I'm going to go through a list of plants and which bee it attracts because all bees have different ways of eating and needs for nutrition. So a black-eyed Susan flower is good for the leafcutter bee. The bumblebee likes blueberries, squash, sunflowers. This bumblebee helps nightshades, pollen, become released from their anthers. So the anther is in the flower that's holding the pollen. And bumblebees use buzz vibrations to sit in there and shake the pollen loose. They love snapdragons, baptisia, lupins. We need our bumblebees. I usually find them sleeping in a squash flower. Pumpkins, melons, cucumbers, watermelon, zucchini, gourds, those are all for that bumblebee. Now we have sweat bees who don't sting you, they bite you. They like eating flesh. They like raspberries, strawberries, herbs that flower, black-eyed Susans, mountain mint, and sunflowers. We also have our small native bees, asters, daisy-like flowers, cosmos, black-eyed Susan, sunflowers, and Mexican sunflowers. We also have mason bees, the tunnel nesters. They love wood hollow stems, like Joe Pyeweed, I think, is one of the plants listed under hollow stem. Their apple trees is what they like to pollinate, and other fruit trees. That's the nectar they dig. Mining bees grow in the ground. That's where they live. They live in the ground in little sandy mounds. They like to help pollinate cherry trees, plum trees, and peaches. To encourage enough food for all bees and have a variety of plants that will bloom at different times is really important because then they always have a food source. So planting things that bloom early, mid, and late in your season. All about that diversity again. Things that go early, roses, dandelions, sumac, willow, blackberry. Things that bloom later in the year, asters, coneflowers, goldenrod, and milkweed. Understand the habitats. They need food and shelter just like us. Hollow-stemmed plants, Joe Pyeweed, box elder, brambles, cut plant, bee balm. Leave some leaves laying around. Have a brush pile somewhere. Rock mounds that stay in place. Offer a water source. I literally take a pie pan, a metal pie pan that my kids would use in the sandbox, and I said, this is now our waterer. I put some rocks in there, helps hold it down, plus a bee can land on the rock and drink from the water. I see parasitic wasps. I see birds. If the birds have food and water, put a bird feeder out and they won't peck your tomatoes and peas out of the ground. Supporting the honeybees. Now, there was something going on in the news that I read for February of 2025 where commercial honeybee keepers were checking the colonies and they were discovering that over 50% of the bees were dead inside the hive and they had enough honey. They were planning on taking the bees to California to help pollinate the almond trees because almond tree pollen is a full nutrient source for the bees. And it's very important for food security to have bees pollinating our food, right? So why? Why are they being found dead? They're encouraging beekeepers to fill out a survey. They're having labs do samples from the hives to test for parasites, pathogens, diseases. We've had diseases before if you've been following bees in the news over the last 10 years. Was it chemical? Was it cold weather? Like, what is going on? So to support the honeybees in 2025, plant asters, lavender, goldenrod, coneflowers, clover, bee balm, black-eyed Susans, have fruit trees, maple trees, willow trees, lupin, thyme. If any of this grows in your area, I've seen them on zinnias. Plant a pack of zinnias. Get a pack of wild flower mix and throw it in somewhere. Now, this was something I learned. Warning, flowers with toxic nectar to bees. I actually asked a beekeeper, I said, haven't bees evolved enough through the generations that they understand what toxic pollen is and to stay away from it? And they said, no, they still try to eat it and then die. So toxic nectar is in azaleas, rhododendrons, and California buckeye, apparently, which that was new to me. So I encourage you to look into companion planting, write it out. I've got a garden planning checklist on my website, Shawnee Grows. We've got videos and live streams over on YouTube. Shawnee Grows is the channel name. Links in the description. Don't forget to follow Learn As You Grow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening from. Leave a review, share it with a fellow gardener, and don't forget to check out my YouTube channel, like I said. Until next time, grow every day in every way.